Evening, everyone. Welcome to the joint Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance budget hearings for the fiscal year 2012. Tonight is a public safety evening, as it were. My apologies for the late start. We were actually waiting for the Board of Selectmen to arrive. Since they're not here yet and we've got a full agenda, we are going to start, so. If I might ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to ask Chief McNamara and Chief Feldner to lead us in the pledge. So if you two gentlemen would come forward, and the flag is right there.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So for this evening, the state of play, first we're going to hear from public safety. We're going to do fire, hydrant and water, emergency management, emergency communications, police, and animal control. Then after a short break, we'll come back and do health and welfare, which will be the health department, and human and social services. Before we get started tonight, Mr. Kiley sends his regrets. He got called out of town just within the last couple of days on business. He will be back for the remainder of our hearings. And Mr. DeWitt had an obligation early in the evening with one of his children, so he will also join us. I also think it fair that we take a little time and say thank you to our public safety professionals for all your work and effort throughout the years and throughout this year. Most specifically, everything that happened in Bridgeport in the past 12 months. We knew you lent a hand there. And just as we thank Public Works for their hard work related to the large snowstorms and weather events, I also know that you all have been very busy related to those events as well. And we thank you for your service. We thank you for your dedication and for putting yourselves in harm's way for us.
Thank you very much.
So, and that's both to the police and the fire and everyone in between.
Thank you, sir.
With that, we're going to start with the fire department tonight, and I'll turn it over to the men.
Thank you, and good evening. First, I'd like to introduce Chairman of our board, Commissioner Thomas Christie, who is here, and other members of our commission are here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome, Doc.
Anyway, we'll get started. Tell me where you'd like to start, if you want to start with the questions, or...
Is there anything, Chief, before we get started that you would like to highlight, and then we can go right to questions, if that...
Yes, definitely, which we send you a breakdown on the vehicle replacement, which I think that'll probably be, if I understand it correctly, brought up on the 14th.
Right.
So we'll do that. The only thing I would like to ask you to consider is our vehicle replacement program. We've had people, we asked for 3, and this Board of Selectmen gave us 1. Well, between that time, we just had another accident which was unavoidable. A deer ran in front of one of the cars. It happened to be an old one with 175,000 miles, so we're short another vehicle. Matter of fact, personnel have been using their private vehicles at times. And, you know, they put in a bill to the town. So I would like you to consider if we can get that 1 extra vehicle instead of the 1, if we could get 2. I think it's a difference of 30,000?
31,000.
About 31,000. So if you'd consider that, that was sort of, I wanted to bring that to your attention, and the pumper.
Thank you. Any other highlights or anything you'd like to spotlight?
No, everything is pretty much, when you looked at the budget book of things that are really necessity, for example, like the thermo-imaging cameras, it's like computers. The technology changes every couple of years, and then they do away with to get parts for the one we bought 3 years ago. So, and that's a very important item, which we just used it again the other day in finding animals in a working fire that we had. And the large diameter hose, well, that's something that's, that you just have to replace periodically, and that's to the tune of $18,000. And the utility vehicle, it's in really dire need. That's for the maintenance shop. I would like you to strongly also consider that. Art, is there anything else?
If I could add, one other item is on there. It's the first request under capital, sprinkler system for Station 2 Jennings Road. We have been awarded a federal grant to the tune of $78,000 to install a sprinkler system in that building. Our 20% share of that is the $14,000 that is here. So that is what the request is, and we debated on this as to whether to try to work that into our budget. We decided to put it under capital, the capital account for any discussion that there may be on that.
And we got the grant for that, as Art said.
Yeah, we do have the grant for that.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Before we move to questions, Mr. Hiller, I think it's fair that we would like an update on where we stand on payroll and overtime for the current year. I know this was an area that we spent a vast amount of time in last year. We had some, gentlemen, the reason I'm focusing here is we had some concerns in our last quarterly report that came up in late January regarding the pacing of the overtime accounts
You understand?
that were of great concern to us. And I also noticed a large increase in those accounts, or we noticed a large increase in those accounts for next year. So I think, at the board's pleasure, I think that's probably the first area to start. Would everyone would agree? So, Mr. Hiller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I did, and I apologize not being able to put this out in a printed format, but you were tonight were distributed to you the year-to-date budget reports through the payroll, which will be distributed tomorrow.
Okay.
Both basically for all departments that are being heard tonight. And fire, since it's the first one, is the top of the page. There are 6 overtime accounts for the fire department. We can walk through them, but vacation, sick, relief, injury, work, training. The budgetary totals for those 6 accounts equates to $2,603,397. $2,603,000 is the primary line. To date, through the payroll to be distributed tomorrow, we have expended $1,981,047, or just over 76% of the payroll of the budgeted overtime. What that equates to is we're using overtime at a rate of $56,601 a week at the current, on an annualized basis. There are 17 weeks left in the fiscal year, which would mean that we would spend, if you just take that, and there's no real scientific basis to it except that it's just the average for the first 35 weeks, realizing there is some seasonality, particularly on the vacation timeframes. But we do have, the last 2 months in which historically there has been high utilization or usage of the overtime accounts. We would use another $962,000 in overtime for a projected total of $2,943,269, or being over budget just slightly under $340,000. That is offset by the first line that you see, regular payroll. There have just recently been 4 new hires who are at the training academy right now, and so there has been a reduction from, if you had with you the sheets that were distributed last week, there was a significantly higher unencumbered balance. That has been reduced to $117,000, which leaves us short, and that always, we look at that as an offset to it. leaves us short basically on the primary payroll accounts before we got into holiday pay or other areas, some $222,000 in those lines.
So we're short 223, and Mr. Hiller, refresh our memories if you might. How much did this board raise these accounts by last year?
From the first selectman's recommendation, 125,000.
And we came in pretty close to the department's recommendation for what they wanted for their overtime.
Yeah, we
Counts.
got up some, but not quite full, but obviously closer. But from where we originally were, if you go back to the first selectman's recommended budget of this time last year, in the final deliberations, this board added 125, and I think into three separate accounts.
Okay. Any questions, comments from board members? Mr. Brockfeld?
Simple question, just to throw you a layup to start, is what's driving the overtime being larger than budgeted or expected? Or maybe you didn't expect it, but we did.
Well, right now, we have 3 personnel out on long-term sick with serious illness. Not injury, it's out sick. So that we can't control. The overtime this year was asked when Bridgeport got hit with the tornado, and then they had a serious fire where they lost 2 firefighters. Yes, we spent quite a bit of money over there, and the question was asked, well, gee, we're sending our people over there. So I did a little analysis, and the year before, they were here in Fairfield more than we were over there. They got hit hard. It happened because we had to hire back when we sent people over there to cover Fairfield. So that took a big hit for us in the overtime that we had to happen. Do we think it's going to happen again? You know, we don't know. I doubt it. But that took quite a big hit out of the budget. That took a good chunk out of the budget.
How much, Chief?
The total in that,
It's about $60,000.
60,
Right off in the first-
$65,000.
In the first quarter of this year, we were $60,000 behind where we should have been.
And that was all due to the,
The
That was due to
Bridgeport.
mutual aid.
Mutual aid, yeah, the Bridgeport.
If I could add to this, we have, subsequent to these incidents, had some discussions and some negotiations with Bridgeport Fire Department. They have altered some of their response plans and their emergency plans and their mutual aid plans. And for the past 3 months now, I think we went over there once or twice, and it was for very short durations.
And they were here in the last few months 3 times. So, you know, it outweighs, and, you know, I really don't know what else to answer you. We took a hit on that, not making excuses. And then we have 3 longtime sick personnel out now. And it's serious illness. It's not just, you know, they're out sick a few days. It's something that we can't control.
So, can I continue?
sure.
So, I guess this is more to Paul, and just reiterating what you said a second ago, Chairman Flynn. The budget request that these guys made last year was pretty much in line with what the actual numbers were? Because we cut it. I mean, we added to it, I'm sorry.
We added
We added to the
We had to
first
add
selectman,
back,
right?
memory serves me, we had to add back 185,000 last year. In
185,
September
not
to zero the account.
No, but I think Mr. Brockfeld was asking about the budget, right?
I'm just trying to get to whether or not we feel comfortable with this year's request.
I-
25,000.
25.
Mr. Tetro, you had a question?
I believe
I'll
it was
just-
25.
Are you done, Mr. Brockfeld? Yeah.
Yeah, just getting back to the Bridgeport overtime, where would I find that in the overtime lines? You said there's 60 grand. Which
It would,
line item has?
It'd be in fire department business, FD, or
FD.
business other, which is down 51064.
51064?
Yeah, it's overtime earnings, other relief.
Yep.
150, page 156. So we're asking for 280 this year. The budget in 2011 was 243.
I believe you're right, Mike.
Yes, it was.
All right, and could you perhaps provide some explanation for, given the Bridgeport situation between the tornado and
Tragic
the
event.
Fire.
the tragic fire there, was kind of a one-time occurrence unless you're, right? What's the reason for the increase of 40 or 50 grand? Well, 40 grand this year,
We-
36 and change.
We usually project and go back, and it's usually cut every year. And when it's cut, and I'm not pointing a finger anywhere, when it's cut, we know, and we go through this, that we're going to be back here, because we pretty much can tell what it's going to cost. So, you know, for example, this year, we were cut, again, on what we asked for. And to be honest with you, will we be back here next year?
But
Probably.
in the current year, at least as my memory serves, you made that point, you provided I thought, some rather significant documentation to show that 94% of the overtime, if I remember correctly, is contract-related,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So this board increased the overtime amounts back to your original request. So, again, my question's twofold. What is driving this increase above last year's budgeted amount? Why are you expecting next year to be worse than this year to the tune of $40,000? Or almost 15 or 20%? When we had those tragic events this year that drove that.
Good question.
That's a good question. There's a number of factors, and this is the hardest line item of our overtime accounts to plan for, honestly, because this takes into consideration, a lot of things come out of this account. It's not just, the vacation account, it is mostly vacation and holiday overtime.
And that's
The-
contractual.
The sick account is the sick account, it's contractual. The injury account is the injury account. Fire department business other is everything else, which is, can be personal time, funeral leave, mutual aid, callback.
Personally.
A variety of other business that we may send people for, specialized training or something like that, or seminars. We do not, and that is actually the small amount of our overtime budget that is not contractual. That is that's arbitrary, if you will. We have the choice to send people or not to send people. Not that it is not absolutely necessary for some of this. If there's a particular seminar we need to send somebody to, if there's particular fire marshal training, and that falls into two categories, possibly the training account and possibly fire department business other.
Last year, you had some rather significant documentation showing what your track record was in each overtime account. Do you have that same
I do.
documentation
I
for this
do.
account?
I have a copy of it, Mike. I think I did give you that in the packet, too, that we passed out
Okay.
this week.
All right.
I have a spreadsheet with averages. I mean, I have.
It didn't,
I didn't get a...
vacancy comparison, budget,
Let me-
Not sure which one of
See
those
if you
we
have
have.
this. Mike.
And this year, frankly, I think, there is, we are asking for some more there,
Yeah,
but
I-
that is
Thank you.
again, this line gets rather arbitrary.
Thank you.
So how much is too much to ask for, and how much is not enough to ask for? It's a little bit hard to predict.
yeah, and again, I applaud the documentation you did last year, and I think you convinced this board, because, again, as memory serves, we adjusted those numbers back up to make sure that you had the overtime that you did, so every fall, as you pointed out, we sit here and kind of ask why you're over in overtime, and you point out that we cut it in the spring, so we
We can't
didn't
use
do
that
that.
excuse this year.
Right, well, that's kind
We
of...
know that.
So,
Yeah.
kind of two questions for that line. What do you expect us to end up at the end of the year, through June 30th, in that line this year? What's your projection? Given some of these tragic events are behind us, given some of the,
But we have three right now. Mr. Tetro, long-term sick, and we know that's going to continue.
okay, but sick relief is someplace else, isn't it?
That's in
Overtime
vacancy,
earnings, sick
isn't it?
relief?
I'm sorry, I'm going to the other one.
And we,
Yeah, you're right, okay.
I'm just focusing on the one overtime line, the other relief, just trying to understand why that's increasing this year so much over
Now,
last
it's-
year, and kind of for the current year, which is not reflected in either of these two numbers, the actuals for this year, Right now, the question is, where do you project we'll end up at the end of the year? We're through 8 months.
In that line alone, I'm going to take a stab at this. We're probably going to be $30,000 over in there on that line. That line is somewhat slowed down now, as I said, in the past couple